Welcome to our Northampton Community Television audience. This is Rick Haggerty with Kickin' for Peace, Culture, and Education at Valley Free Radio, 103.3 FM Northampton, airing each Sunday morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and replaying Tuesday nights 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. So thank you so much for being here. And I want to say thank you to our guest this morning, Obry. How are you this morning, Obry?
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, Rick.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. And your book, I'm Not Chinese, is a book about entrepreneurialism, cooking, and discovery. I'm holding this up for our Northampton Community Television audience. And it says, discovering how life takes on new meaning when you decide to work for yourself, discovering how you discover who you were not, apparently. So let's talk about that a little bit. And why don't you tell me and our listeners the inspiration for writing this book?
Well, I was at a point in my life when I was willing to do just about anything other than look for a job. So I decided to create a job. And after deciding to create a job, came to realize that you work twice as hard when you work for yourself.
I hear you there.
Yeah. And as it developed, I discovered things about myself, things that worked, things that didn't work, and it helped me find a direction to go in changing the world through nutrition.
Well, that's such a powerful thing. I mean, I mentioned when we were off the air that my fiancée Lizzie is a certified health coach, and we're living that every day. Oh, yeah. So talk more about that. What were you eating before you wrote this? Did you always have a mind for nutrition? Were you enlightened at one point, or what? Let's talk about that a little bit.
I do most of the cooking at home. Let me rephrase that. I do all the cooking. At home. My wife bakes, I cook. But when you're out in the events at festivals and fairs, there's always fried food. There's fried dough, there's French fries, there's fried this, fried that. And I realized that there was nobody serving a menu that I would eat, that I would enjoy, that I would buy. And so I started the business as an alternative, because when you work for yourself, you're always looking for a niche, your new way into the market. And as you discover what your niche is, you discover things about yourself. You think things that work, things that don't work. And it doesn't take long before people start picking up on what you're about. And they start telling other people about it. And before long, you have a following.
You know, it almost sounds a little bit like the restaurant business in Northampton. You know, there's vegetarian and vegan, and it's really kind of picked up around here in the Pioneer Valley. Now, so you did this for yourself, but it sounds like you have a cooking business. Is that what it led to, or sharing it through your book, or going cooking at fairs? Or talk more about how you've shared this with others, or what this has led to.
When we first began the business, we were booking any show that would have us in as part of that event, and we came to realize that no one else was serving the menu that we serve. And the thing that really sold it was every order was cooked to order. So people would come there and they would order it, and they could see it being cooked, they could smell it being cooked.
Nice.
And then when they got it, they would stand around eating it, and other people would say, "Ooh, that looks beautiful."
word of mouth sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
So if you just tuned in, we're with author Obry Weiler, author of I'm Not Chinese, a book about entrepreneurialism, cooking, and discovering how life takes on new meaning when you decide to work for yourself. So tell us about the new meaning.
Well, not everybody is ready to go to college to take on a professional career. And the days of my life have been spent trying to discover what works the best for me and how I can have a better life by virtue of working at being who I am. And in the beginning, I was crushed when people would ask me if this looked like Chinese food to you. And I learned to make it look like Chinese food. And that's how we became known as the Chinese people.
Interesting.
Yeah, people would come to this event and say, "Oh, where's that smell coming from?" And they would hear, "The Chinese people."
Yeah.
And then when they came up to us, they would say, "Well, you're not Chinese." And so by not being Chinese, I brought in an audience of regular people who would bring their friends back and say, "This is the guy. This is the Chinese guy." And they would say, "You're not Chinese."
Now, which came first, the book, I'm Not Chinese, or the cooking and discovering that people were saying I'm not Chinese, bringing the food out? Tell us about the succession of...
Well, I started out cooking, and the theory is that when you spend 10,000 hours working at something, you either get really good at it or you have a mental breakdown. And the more I cooked, the better I got. And the better I got, the better the business was operating. And so over a number of years, people would ask me how I ever got into such an arcane business, not being Chinese and yet serving Chinese food. And they said, "Oh, you should write a book about it." And so after 30 years, the only thing left to do was to write a book about it. And so the book got written.
Nice.
Oh,
nice. So working for yourself, I have to ask you, how did you find the time to do the writing? I mean, let's talk about that a little bit, because I've thought about a book myself with different experiences. And
over the time, I would take down notes of memorable situations. And when I say memorable, I mean situations where if I found myself telling friends what had happened, they would be less inclined to believe it, because there were some pretty crazy situations over the years. And I couldn't have done this without my wife. She helped me to be successful because she wanted me to be successful as bad as I did. And so we worked together, and I have to tell you, Rick, it was like marriage encounter on steroids. You've never known a woman until you work in a high-pace food takeout joint, because I came to know that look that all men know from their wives, the look that questions if you still are in the right mind. And so we grew together as we sold the Chinese food, and we became quite famous on the circuit.
Awesome. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about Satori, because there's an enlightenment side that you've talked a little bit about. Maybe you could define Satori and talk about it, how it's in your lives, in the book, and how this is. I think we talked about part of your what I heard from my Buddhist terms, it would be your human revolution, your development as an individual, and how that impacts others.
Well, Satori translated is enlightenment. And enlightenment isn't something that you do once. It's a continuing process of discovering yourself and using everything that you've discovered to go on from there, following the thread of your life as your life occurs. And I was discovering my life as this occurred, and it led me to places I never thought I would end up being in my life. Most people go to their jobs every day. They know who they're going to meet. They know what they need to do to get paid at the end of the week. And my life was a little bit more of an open-ended equation. And I would go to events without really knowing if we would be profitable, if it would go bust. And so every time we went out to an event, it was like going out on safari. And so we would go out and do the best. And in the beginning, it was very hard, because if you're selling the wrong product in the wrong market, you're going to be disappointed. You've got to learn to target who your audience is. And once you tap into that, the sky is the limit. And that's what we discovered about running the business. And also, when we were at work, working in the trailer, it was a mobile kitchen. It was a live act. There was no turning back. People would come and order, and you would cook it. And the worst thing that could happen is you burn it or drop it. And so we learned to balance all those high wire acts in one consistent progress of doing these events. And they were all different. Dog shows, motorcycle shows, rock and roll shows, you name it, we were there.
Yeah, it's so cool. You know, you mentioned, if I can mention this, you guys were married in North Truro.
Oh yeah, we were.
Yeah,
right on the beach.
Right on the beach, and I'm thinking it might be Coast Guard Beach if it was anywhere near the Highland Light. You know, which is where we go. You know, see my T-shirt. Oh, here I'll show. Here we go. Yeah, so. There it is right there, North Truro T-shirt. I just happened to wear this morning. So, but you know, going up there, which we do, Lizzie and I do quite often, and our little guy Joey. There are food trucks around at the Vineyard, down at the chocolate. Oh God, I forget the name of it. Which Wachusett? Chocolate, I think, on nearby, in town, in P-Town. There are food trucks all over the place, and I often think to myself, how do they get by? How do they do this? You know, how do they come in, crank it up, get it going? You know, there's even a food truck I think that goes down to the beach. You know, but how they make it work and avoid waste, and a lot of them are really handling really, good food, kind of life-affirming, healthy stuff like you.
Well, I think the thing that contributed to our success was the fact that we made every order as it was ordered. And our particular trailer had 3 counters open to the public. So the best advertising was to see someone standing there eating a mountain of noodles with delicious vegetables and chicken on it or shrimp, and they would be standing there eating, and other people would say, "Oh, that looks so beautiful." So we sold a lot of food simply because it looked so pretty and so nutritious. And when we were doing shows, we fed most of the other vendors because they were tired of eating fried dough or French fries or
junk.
Sausages. Yeah, junk,
right.
And we ended up cooking a lot for the people at these shows who worked there, especially at Carney's when we would do fairs. Carney's are a very unique group of people, and they live on the road, and they're always looking for a meal that takes care of their hunger, and they would always come to us. And on the lot, we fed just about everyone. As soon as we opened in the morning and started cooking, you could smell roasted sesame oil and garlic and ginger all over the fields, and people would follow their noses and end up at the China Kitchen, which was the name of our vending service. So the diversity of the shows put us in touch with the same kind of a diverse crowd, and everybody loved our food.
That sounds really awesome. We're going to talk some more. If you just tuned in, we're speaking with Obry Wiley, author of I'm Not Chinese, a book about entrepreneurialism, cooking, and discovering how life takes on new meaning when you decide to work for yourself. This is Rick Haggerty with Kickin' It for Peace, Culture, and Education, right here on Valley Free Radio. And this is WXOJ 103.3 FM Northampton, Valley Free Radio. Streaming online at valleyfreeradio.org. And speaking of North Truro and P-Town, a wonderful group that I met there. It might have been last summer. They also hail from Key West, Florida. Tori Mata and Ben Waite Pegg. We're going to listen to Yellow Moon, take a break, and maybe another tune from Love Maximum. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll be right back. All right. right. That was Love Maximum with Tori Mata and Ben Waite Pegg. And they're out of Key West, Florida. And they play in Provincetown, a wonderful group. It's called the Love Maximum. And if you just tuned in, I'm here with Obry Wiley, author of I'm Not Chinese. And it's a book about entrepreneurialism, cooking, and discovery of how life takes on new meaning when you decide to work for yourself. So it's very exciting to have you with us today, and we're going to talk about some other things. Now, you play a little music here and there. You want to talk about that, or?
We do. I made a decision to go back in my life to the things that brought me amounts of joy when I was younger, and I decided to actively pursue them because they brought me so much joy. And so I organized a Sunday afternoon jam session at my house, and we rocked the place.
Nice.
If you're in Conway, you'll hear it. My friend Gove is perhaps one of the hottest harmonica players you will ever hear.
And what do you play? What instrument?
I play guitar lead and rhythm guitar.
Nice.
And trying to get my wife to play tambourine, but she stays in the background.
I've done that with Lizzie as well. That's my fiance. So you need a drummer.
We need a drummer. We need a drummer and a piano player.
Let's see what I can do. Oh, nice. Well, if you had heard, that was something my son's band Somos, I talked about that a little bit. I said to him at one point, I said, one of the groups that I loved up to Captain Fantastic was Elton John. And I said to him, what about a little piano? And sure enough, in Iron Heel, which you missed because you were on your way in, I'm like, you put some piano in there. It's great. So you guys rock it pretty much. Yeah.
We play pretty straightforward blues, and everybody gets a chance to stand in the limelight and put their stuff up in front.
Cool.
And, the thing about it is we work together to bring the best out in each other.
Awesome.
And that's the same thing as when we were in business. You have to form connections with other people to achieve your own self-enlightenment, because it's so hard to do it alone.
Yeah. That connections with other. I mean, obviously going through the intense, personally, grief, healing, and remembering, that process. I've realized. And just in life in general, I've realized, the more connections, the better. And that's such an important aspect of growing and developing, go ahead.
Well, in the beginning, my success was limited by learning how to become a better cook. Hadn't put my 10,000 hours in, but I did come to realize that I needed help. And that's when my wife stepped in and the business grew, and we hired other people to work with us. And I realized the success that I was experiencing was based on their input, their help. And so I wanted to help them make their lives better. And so we always paid our help a very good wage, because they were usually single moms with kids, and they would give us their loyalty, which enabled me to do better.
Awesome. Yeah. And Brenda Jean, if you're listening, we've got a muffin for you, which is going to be brought home. Banana nut, if that's okay. And by the way, I'm a teacher, fifth grade special ed teacher in the Springfield schools, and Brenda Jean is art teacher,
Jackson Street,
Northampton public schools. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and let's hear it for them getting that contract that they were chasing after.
What's really funny,
self-advocating for.
What was really funny is when we would be doing a show, and some of my wife's students would see her standing there selling Chinese food, and it was totally a different role for her to play. and they would stand there looking at her and asking her, "What are you doing in that business?" And so she had a hard time. And I've always encouraged her to put working in a Chinese takeout on her resume, but she feels she can stand alone in that respect.
Yeah. Well, and Lizzie chimes in and she says, sounds like you and Brenda Jean are pioneers in what has become more of a trend now with healthy eating and high quality food trucks. And she adds that you looks like you helped to completely revolutionize the industry and change the way we eat. So that's a listener and my sweetheart chiming in.
Well, we gauged our success by the volume of noodles that we sold. And there were weekends when we would put out over 600 pounds of noodles in 2 days. And over the course of my career, I've sold more than 16 tons of noodles, 8 ounces at a time. So it was an ongoing production. And every order was an individual trip about learning how to do it, what people enjoyed, what they were expecting, what their expectations were. And I tried to fulfill those expectations of something new and different every time.
Awesome. Well, and the other thing I wanted to say about Brenda Jean's work is that, the arts, music, all that's all being threatened, and that she's doing that in the schools is such an important thing. I co-teach in a 5th grade classroom, and my head teacher, of the class happens to be a certified art teacher, and we've got music and the arts in the school. It's such an important thing. And I mentioned that Seth and the guys, my son included, from Somos, all went to Pioneer Valley Performing Arts Charter High School, where the arts are a given, but it's not always a given in public schools.
That's true. All teachers deserve the respect of creating the potential for the future of the students they teach and instruct. And this is an important thing because in the vending world, every time we had an opportunity to serve somebody good food, they remembered that occasion. And if they didn't have the money, we would give it to them for free. And I would always say,
that's awesome.
Come back and bring a hungry friend. And in all those years, they always did. And we served lots and lots of people.
Wow, that sounds really, I read a quote recently, being Buddhist, I chant daily and, read. And the quote is a paraphrase. You can have fame, fortune or, great circumstances. But your true worth is measured in how much you contribute or give to others.
Boy,
so it sounds like you guys are,
that is
in touch with that.
Well, it's a way of giving love to other people. When people are out at events, they usually don't plan, and they want something to eat, and we provided them with such an enormous amount of food that they would always ask for 2 plates. And we knew what they were doing. They were going to share it. And they would always come back because they knew the food that we gave them was fresh, it was cooked to order, and it was plentiful. And we didn't try to say, oh, you owe us this much money, because it was more than money. It was making a statement about what we believed, which was getting good food out there and sharing the love with people.
The other thing, that's so incredible. The other thing I wanted to say was just to publicly thank you for your compassion and understanding, with the whirlwind of, losing our dear son and deciding after a couple of weeks off that I should do a memorial show for him, that I just completely spaced out that you were my guest last week and you were driven all the way from Conway. And, I had my son's co-bandmate calling in. It was like all set. The music was all lined up, and you didn't even flinch. And you just said, or just conveyed your deepest condolences and drove home and drove back, this week. So I want to say, my deepest thanks and appreciation for your understanding and compassion.
Well, Rick, one of the things that I've learned in running this business for 30 years is that this is not a forever situation. You have a limited amount of time in your life to do the best you can for yourself and others. And you find that people are generally not much different than you are. They have hopes, they have dreams, they have desires. They get hungry, they don't want a fried dough. They want cold noodles. And, the people that got to know us were like an extended family. And they would always say, "Oh, we're so glad you're here." It was like, and the strange thing was we have friends who are very close, but we would only see them maybe 2 days out of the year, but for the next 25 years. And those friendships are some of the most solid friendships I've ever established in my life. And they're still meaningful.
That's really, really wonderful.
It is.
Really wonderful. So, again, we've been speaking with Obry Wiley, author of I'm Not Chinese. It's a book about entrepreneurialism, cooking, and discovering how life takes on new meaning when you decide to work for yourself. And any closing thoughts? Anything else? I mean, that was a great closing thought, but anything else you want to add?
If you're questioning your own life, don't be afraid to fail. Once you move from your comfort zone, you start discovering what you're capable of. And you might just discover a new way to go about living your life that changes you completely and brings you into a whole new circle of people who will support you in doing that, as they're looking for the same thing themselves.
Yeah, and taking that risk like you guys did, or you did, going off on your own and delivering on healthy food. Thank you so much again.
Oh, thank you.
All right, I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
I would love an opportunity to do that, Rick.
Yeah, that'd be a great thing. And I want to say thank you to our Northampton Community Television audience. Again, this is Rick Haggerty with Kickin' It for Peace, Culture, and Education, airing on 103.3 FM Northampton, Valley Free Radio, Sunday mornings 8 to 10 a.m. and replaying Tuesday nights 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. for the Night Owls. And coming up next, I've got This Date in Music History. Do you know, in this date, Mata Hoople released All the Young Dudes, which I love. That was from my high school years, 72. And born on this date, Pigpen, Ron McKernan, Grateful Dead, right? And Brenda Jean would be interested in that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Brenda Jean and the Grateful Dead.
And Lizzie too. Lizzie's a Deadhead. And also one of my 45s is by, did I leave that in there? Yeah. Let's see. One of the 45s later on, the association will be playing. Brian Cole was born on this date in 1942. And the other births I had in 1960, David Steele of the English Beat and Finding the Uncountables, and Amy Mann. So, and I will read our enlightening quote. You might like this. This is from Daisaku Ikeda from my Buddhist organization, the Soka Gakkai, SGI USA. This is from Wisdom for Modern Life. Without opposition, there is no growth. It is hard to argue with that logic. A state in which we are free from problems or constraints is not happiness. Happiness is transcending all opposition and obstacles and continuing to grow.
Boy, is that the truth.
Isn't that the truth? All right. Obry, thank you so much. And we're going to go on to... we're going to look at, we're going to listen to some, well, how about if we start with a little Grateful Dead, and then go on to Mata Hoople and David Bowie, English Beat, Amy Mann, few from that area. So thanks again.